about these little nuggets that we have. I'll give you an example of how hard fundraising is. One year, I was fundraising. I was on the road. I was traveling 280 days out of 365. That's how hard it can be. And we were successful in raising that fund, but it is tough to do. And we'll get into a little bit of why is that so difficult. So a little bit about me. Most of you guys know me, but just a little bit about me. I come from humble beginnings. My dad's actually a Lutheran missionary. We grew up all throughout, the Midwest, and then actually I lived in Australia for 4 years. My mom's a retired home ec teacher. Put myself through school by taking on the odd IT job. I like to joke around. I basically went to the University of Chicago. I graduated. When I graduated, I was getting 6 job offers a day because I like to joke around because I could spell IT, and everyone thought the world was going to fall apart due to Y2K. I was credentialed as a consultant. So I did some really cool projects. I was a part of the E-Trade Go Live, the Orbits Go Live. I was part of the HP Compaq merger. I was 23 years old, talking to a group of 300 people about how we were going to basically merge their mainframe systems into their IT, into their distributed systems, and how they were going to do that. At that point, I said, "Oh, this is great. Billable time is wonderful, but there's only so much billable time in the day." I actually read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I said, "Well, I'm not a real estate guy, so that's not going to work. So I'll just start my own business." And so I started the business in December of 1999, right, a month before Y2K hit, which was a much to do about nothing. And I basically called up all the friends that I had. You have to remember, this is before any kind of formal training school in IT. And I said, "Hey, I can't afford to pay you a salary that you normally get. However, I can give you room and board, and I'll pay you what I can, and I'll give you equity." And so 13 brave souls volunteered to live in my 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath house at that point. I was working literally, probably 20 hours a day. I kid you not. I would literally never go to bed. I would just basically crash at my desk. And we would do that effectively 6 days a week. Sunday, we only worked half the day. And we actually had shirts. We said, basically, if you don't come in on Saturday, don't bother coming in on Sunday, printed out. So, but I'm happy to say that we grew that company from 0 to 50 million organically. I would not advise anyone to do that. It was all the hard way. And we sold it. And it was a great success. All 13 people became millionaires. Very proud of that. And then at that point, I went on to started a family office called Terra Rosa. A couple of years later, I started a private equity fund called Domain Capital that is looking at the enterprise software space. Companies that are between $1 and $10 million that are looking for growth that we can grow to hopefully achieve $20, $50 million of revenue, which is where a lot of the capital feeding frenzy exists. And then, we started Terra Rosa's family office, started Domain Capital, and then last year, because our family office was getting inundated with requests around how can AI really help me, we decided to create an OakTech system, which is where we started that in June of last year. So, I basically saw AI as a really key instrument to helping businesses really achieve success. So, a little bit of background about myself. But yeah, it's amazing what OakTech has done since we literally just started a year ago. It's been so fast. So the first thing you want to kind of determine, right, is do you really need fundraising, right? Fundraising does have its issues. You truly are partnering up with people when you raise money from them. I think it is the best form of capital because it's a win-win. When you exit, your investors win, right? So it is the best form of capital, in my opinion, especially when you're growing. But you have to execute well. You have to manage expectations. You have to have a good plan, right? You should not fundraise just because you think you need capital. You should fundraise because you've gone through the process of understanding what it is you need, why you need it, and what are those milestones that need to be achieved in order to be successful. Because otherwise, it's not, like I always joke around, like everyone loves their family, right? Family's very, very important. And people hold their family so close to them, but they hold their money even closer. So just be aware of that. So you really got to build that relationship. People have to trust you, and the first step to doing that is managing expectations around what am I going to do? I'm going to write this check. What am I going to get out of this? At the end of the day, what is the end plan? What is the return? So, and debt is something that's that we're going to cover later in another session. Debt is one of these things that there comes with a lot of covenants, and you can literally lose your company, right? Assuming you go through that, if you start breaking covenants, and then it's really nasty. However, debt can be used appropriately in certain situations. And real estate guys, I know, debt is really, really key. So I'm not trying to say that is not the case, but when you're looking at buying a business like an enterprise software company, debt is, not a big fan of debt, but the same type of process of finding debt is very similar to fundraising, believe it or not. All right, so like when we built out OakTech and specifically about this problem, there are some real core principles and real results around this. And what we've seen with the methods that we'll talk about here today is that you basically can reduce time by 40 to 6% across a diverse number of sectors, from fintech to hospitality, as well as ensure that the personal approach to the outreach actually is really helpful. So, prioritize fit over volume. It's about quality. It's not about quantity, right? It's not about sending 10,000 emails a day or 100,000 emails a day. You see all these TikToks, they're great, and you're just like, well, surely that's going to work. It's not the case, right? It's all going to go to spam. Your domain's going to get flagged. It's not about quantity. It's about quality. It's about the personalized approach. It's about telling a story. It's about educating people around what the heck it is that you're about to sell to them, so that they understand the math. And then it's about tracking the behavior and then effectively scoring continuously so that you understand where you might have dropped off the intent of a person, but as well as starting the real engagement and where to kind of prioritize your time. And then try to automate as much as you can, and then forecast that accurately, right? Because you don't want to kid yourself. I see this all the time, especially new fund managers, like, oh, that person's going to come in. Not GC, it's very realistic, but he's gone through fundraising enough. But there's a lot of first-time fund managers like, oh yeah, that guy's going to come in, and it's just like you should not put all your eggs in one basket. At the end of the day, it is a numbers game, but you don't start it out as a numbers game, right? You have to curate, the number of folks and companies that would be interested in investing, very much so you can kind of move it across, kind of pipeline. And then ultimately speaking, you want, you don't want to chase low-quality leads. You want to just kind of spend the time that's necessary. So I always joke around, fundraising is a performance sport. You don't just start fundraising and all of a sudden, it does happen from time to time if your last name is Zuckerberg, but you just don't show up one day and all of a sudden people are like, well, where have you been all my life? Here's $1 billion, right? It just doesn't happen. So you have to get out there. It's a slow build, right? It takes a long time. You should budget a year to do these things. The average VC fund closes in 17.4 months. Just think about that. That is a year and a half before they finally do their first close. And those are people, by the way, that are in the industry. They already have the networks. They go to the right social clubs. They do all these things, right? Year and a half, right? So again, the power behind AI is super important because you can really shrink those timelines if you know what you're doing. I've seen it done in 6 months when it's a super exciting project. The project that we did here was super exciting and achieved that, but it's a slow build, and all of a sudden one day someone starts signing up and then it's like a lemming effect. So just manage your expectations when it comes to fundraising. It's a slow build. Rome wasn't built overnight. You're not going to show up on the golf course one day completely inexperienced and be Tiger Woods. You're just not going to do it, right? And neither did him. Hug and kiss your significant others, families, and friends, because they won't be seeing you for a while. This is not for the faint of heart. If you want to fundraise, that's great, but it comes at a tremendous personal cost, period and end. I've never seen anyone be successful at fundraising unless they've come from the industry, or like I said, their last name is Zuckerberg, and then ultimately be successful overnight. There's a lot of lessons learned, but you can basically mitigate a lot of those things by surrounding yourself with people who know what they're doing, know what the best practices are tapped in with folks that they have actually proven to be successful with, and it's about that network effect that ultimately makes a huge difference. So the old way of doing things, very, very manual, right? So let me walk you through it, right? So basically, and this is what I did for a long time, right? So, since 2014. Basically, you send out a bunch of emails, you copy and paste your standard email. A bunch of people, you blast them out. You basically, send the pitch decks manually. You walk into meetings and you try to gather insights. You do manual, due diligence. You do manual follow-ups, and ultimately speaking, you get a lot of human bias. You don't quite understand. You get really frustrated, and it's like, gosh, I went to like 100 meetings. 10 were actually important or kind of worked out, and only one person came in. That's kind of the ratio. So how do you kind of get through that? So the way to do this is, the first step is contact sources, right? So using LinkedIn, using Apollo, using PitchBook, ADV forms. What are ADV forms? ADV forms are forms that are published by financial institutions in the United States. It's required by the SEC over a certain threshold. And what those ADV forms show you is, what is it that I'm typically investing in? So it's a great source of understanding, okay, if you're an institution, maybe they're interested in technology, and you can actually see what they're actually investing in, and you can kind of go to that and then filter those out using a whole litany of different tools. From an email perspective, we use GMass, obviously Microsoft, well not obviously, but we use Microsoft, MailReef, and MailChimp. Those are different tools that allow you to suss out the emails that bounce, because you don't want to put bounced emails inside your CRM, because HubSpot, Salesforce, they get really upset at you when you start bouncing emails like crazy. Again, back to quality, not quantity. And then from a DNS perspective, you're going to use Google DNS, Microsoft DNS, MailReef DNS, as well as DNS config. That's really, really helpful because you want to make sure your domain authority is really positive and good, and it's not going to be looked at as a spam, because you don't want to start communicating out and all of a sudden your emails are landing as spam all the time. And I know some of you guys are very, very experienced with that, but it's certainly important. And then the other tool that we use from a domain reputation perspective is Instantly. From a CRM perspective, we really like Go High Level. Go High Level is a really, really good tool because you can customize the crap out of it. And I've done every CRM system. Back in my consulting days, well actually back in the college days, I was using a CRM system that was made out of COBOL, which was interesting. Then SAP, PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, Salesforce.com, HubSpot, pretty much use them all. There's a lot more now today, but Go High Level is a really great tool. But you put all these things together and you can automate a lot of this process, and you basically take that workflow and you automate it together. But we'll get into the exact how of doing it, how we do that. So the first step is AI targeting, right? So you got to find the contacts. So who are your prospective contacts? It depends on, so as an investor profile, there's three types of investors, right? There's high net worth folks. There's family offices. Now what's a family office? Family office typically is someone who's had an exit event. They have got a lot of money from a sale, and they're sitting there and they're like, do I want to give this to Goldman Sachs or JD, or some other wealth manager, or do I want to hire people to invest this money myself? If they choose to invest the money themselves, then it's called a family office typically. And you see multi-family offices, or multi-family offices, not the real estate project, but you see these things where a lot of families will come together and they'll pay for like a chief investment officer and an analyst to effectively figure out how to invest in those things. I really like family offices. Why? Because it's really, there's usually some sort of founder in the family office world that actually made the money. Sometimes it's the dad or the mom, grandmother or grandfather, but there's usually someone who's the entrepreneur who made the business that had the exit event, and so that typically is the decision maker. I love that, right? Because there's typically one person to make the decision. Now, family offices can get so big, like the Corningware family, which I know, that they actually have a tremendous number of people doing all of that analysis and stuff like that. So typically, like the first generation makes the wealth, the second generation, starts to get a little bit more distant. By the third or fourth generation of the family office, they already have the chief investment officer, the CFOs who's got the investment decisions, and that basically means that they're kind of an institution. And now the issue with institutions is that, the institutions, effectively are very bureaucratic. It takes a long time. And so what do? So we've had a database of about 200,000 contacts within our database that we have, curated through, 15 years. And the whole idea is to create engagement, figure out what the profile is, and figure out what their intent is. We'll get to that a little bit in a second. But what is the big difference from an investment perspective? High net worth people typically will invest in 0 to 3 months. Check size will average between around $250,000 in commitments. Family offices typically will take 3 to 9 months to raise the capital, so it's a little bit longer, right? Because there's a little bit more people involved in there. But the average check size there, can get into the $1 million, $2 million or more. And then institutions. Institutions are endowments, right? So basically you look at schools that have a whole bunch of money they need to invest. You have foundations, which obviously are nonprofit, places where people make the investment. And then you have pension plans, which is where all the retirement money goes. And then you have fund of funds. Fund of funds are people that are out there that are really good at analyzing other funds and figuring out a way to pull all this stuff together in a hybrid approach so that they can make investments. They'll make a little bit of money, or they'll make an investment in technology, but in real estate, and so forth. So those are the kind of different types of investment. How long does it take to get money out of an institution? 1 to 2+ years. Very, very long cycle. The institution will say, this is our budget for the year, and that is that. So when you actually start pitching to them day one, you're already a year ahead because they've already made their decision for that year. Now you might tack it to tail it, but typically it's 1 to 2 year wait. The issue with institutions is they can't be more than 20% of your fund, right? So why not? There is a rule that says if they are more than 20% of your fund, they actually have to look through and be responsible for your investors, and that is a big deal. That is an SEC rule, and you get big companies like CalPERS and CalSTRS, and they don't want to have that headache, right? It's just like we got enough responsibility, we got enough regulations. Last thing we need is to track somebody else's LP base. That's just not going to work. So okay, they can't be more than 20%. The minimum check size of an institution is $10 million. So you do the math, right? Math is, well, you're probably not going to be more. Your fund has to be more than $50 million or higher, and that's actually a tier 4 institution. Most tier 1 institutions are writing checks of $100 million, $200 million, and so you basically have to be a $1 billion fund before you're going to get any money from them. So when you're first starting out in the fund business or raising capital, it's going to be the easiest to get it from high net worth as well as family offices, without a doubt. And then once you build up your brand, then you can effectively get more and more people interested at the institutional level. And then, there's a lot of people that once you get an institution, I found this out, once you get an institution, then a lot of other institutions kind of follow. So it's effectively the same thing as first work fundraising. So from an AI outreach perspective, how do we do it? So the typical way is when founders reach out to people, they copy and paste emails, and they basically do these manual sequences all day long. What we do, and what's the best way to do it, is by taking LP-specific email content and messaging it through smart follow-ups. So basically kind of understanding, okay, this is John Smith, this person comes from this background, what is it that will resonate about this, this particular person? The tools that we use for this, ChatGPT, automated and driven email cadences that we basically personalized via Go High Level. Those are the tools that are really, really helpful. And the goal really is to basically create a personalized tone and cadence around that person. But basically, we try to engage, and then after a certain period of time, which is usually about 10 days, we drop them. Because it's not about sticking and keeping them in your pipeline. There's just way too many opportunities that we find for the matching, because you're basically trying to match up people at that point, that you just got to keep moving and don't delay. But the personalization is really kind of important. And then, assuming someone actually starts to engage, historically, you had no idea if someone actually opened up your email or your deck, right? Did they spend 10 minutes on it or 10 seconds? Obviously, with a lot of tools that are out there today, there's a lot of ways to understand, okay, this person not only opened up the email, they clicked on the email. There's ways to basically create lead magnets within that email, which are really important, things that would be interesting to someone, like, oh, would you like to understand about how this particular best practice around this particular strategy could be applied to your business, things like that. So something to get engagement. And the tools that we use are Mixpanel, Supabase, Notion's API, and then OpenAI as well. And then effectively we have a silent drop-off detector that flags, basically ghosted leads before they're gone. So these are things that exist, that are out there, basically folks that we're trying to engage with, that at the end of the day just go silent for a while, and we're not really sure why, but then we kind of pick them back up at the end of the day. There's an interesting filter around that. So when you actually do have engagement, you basically set up that meeting. It's been a great meeting. What do you do? Especially when you get into family offices and institutions, you need to create a data room, and that data room needs to be really curated specifically for that investor. So typically, you would set up a data room and you would follow up typically, weeks later. So a lot of times they actually burn legal time with your legal staff or your legal service, and that can be an issue. So the way we do it is we take the input, who's looking at this deal, who's asked to review the data room. We put it through an AI tool, typically ChatGPT, and then effectively we build out the data room that we believe would match up with their needs, right? So if it's an institution, it's going to be a tremendous amount of information, right? Because there's not an institution has never raised their hand and said, you're providing me too much information, right? Never happened in the world, right? However, if you're engaging with a family office, especially high net worth, they're not going to be interested in the details, the aspects of what drove your pro forma at the asset level. They're not going to be interested in legal opinions around this or that. So you really have to curate the data room, when it actually occurs. And this is totally kind of possible there using those tools. The whole idea is have a data room that's specific for that LP. It helps to make that interaction a lot more consistent. So now, scoring and forecasting. So typically what people would do is they would kind of look at these leads manual, and they would have really zero forecast capability. And the new way of doing this is based on the engagement. There is a direct correlation behind engagement, the person's background, around what is the probability around that person actually working out. So then you can prioritize your engagement. So you can say, okay, tell me the top 10 people that are actually interested in this or likely to close, and you can kind of focus in on them versus the folks that are not interested or just aren't showing engagement, or they might have clicked on something but didn't necessarily work. The tools that we use for that are the Go High Level CRM integration with ChatGPT and a tool called Retool. And effectively, we have a forecast view called Capital Forecast View, which updates in real time around that sales pipeline. So it's a really clever model around trying to make sure that you're efficient with your time, as you're zeroing in on different folks. And then conversion. So typically, it's really hard to convert people over, and so there, historically, post the meeting, it was really difficult to get people to engage beyond that. And so the goal here is you can automate follow-up summaries so that you don't have to, especially when you're on the road and you're trying to figure all this stuff out. It's like, oh, I need to send an email here, I need to send an email there. With like Go High Level, you can basically automate a lot of the things that say, okay, yes, we had the meeting, just run that particular email sequence. So that email sequence will go, oh, thank you again for the meeting. Is there anything else that you need? And then wait for the response. If the response doesn't come, another email comes, and you can do this in conjunction with perhaps your EA on the back end to follow up, because it's really helpful to send an email and then have someone follow up and call at the same time, because emails are really easy to ignore, but it's really hard to ignore an EA calling you on behalf of the CEO or managing partner of the firm, and saying, hey, we'd like to schedule a follow-up and all that stuff, kind of going down that path. So you're basically using, we use Zapier, they're obviously Go High Level, but the whole idea is to create automations that are smart follow-up techniques to the meetings post them actually happening, and convert them along the way. So you kind of put all these things together, and it's great. It works a lot better. Typically, before you would have really no point tools, you would have no orchestration, there was no unified system, you were the unified system, and you're basically a one-trick pony, right? So it's just like, it's very, very stressful and challenging. And oh, by the way, you're typically doing a full-time job, in addition to that too. So you can just imagine what's going on there. Versus what we have today is if you combine all these different tools and you can orchestrate them together, you really can reduce the time it takes to actually get folks that are interested and get that engagement going. So typically what happens with disconnected systems, and I've certainly seen this myself, is that if before the typical way was you would just try to do it yourself, but you would forget things, I would forget things, the follow-ups would be delayed, people would get upset, and so you just lose a lot of opportunity, and that's not a great thing. Now everything's being tracked, scored, sequenced, and forecasted automatically, and that is really, really helpful. Because again, this is a performance sport, right? This is not something this is going to work overnight, and also there's no magic button, by the way, to just click the switch and it's going to work out. Just I'll come back in a year and everything will be raised. It's not the way it works. You still have to be dedicated to the cause, and these tools definitely help for sure, but they're not going to do it for you. You have to provide and iterate on these systems, time and time again. It's a lot more efficient than the old way of doing things for sure, But at the end of the day, this is the best way to kind of get the results. So Cork and Mines is a great example. So I thought I'd kind of use this. So Cork and Mines, again, this wonderful restaurant, this wonderful team, distilled version of what it is that these guys do, and taking it into a bistro lounge kind of format. We started this in August of last year, and it was a slow build, right? JC would be the first to admit it, right? Many phone calls, right, around is this going to work? And I'm like, it'll work. It just you got faith, got to play time, And JC is a man of faith, and he trusted me, which I really appreciate. And then all of a sudden, that first investor came in, and then all of a sudden it was like a lemming effect, right? That occurred, but because the systems that we had in the back end. So super proud of where we're at today. Our original target, minimum target was $10 million. We're at now $14.5 million with $27 million in soft commits. What does that mean? Basically means that we've got $14.5 million of people that have signed subdocs, and an additional $12.5 million of subdocs, or people that have said that they were interested in the fund. So tremendous success. Again, it's this exponential curve that exists, and I see this time and time again. We've done this for build to rent. We've done this for single family rentals. We've done this for mobile home parks. We've done this for a citrus farm, a citrus land play. We've done this for a number of different sectors out there. So very, very excited. I'd say that when you start a fund, you have to begin with the end in mind. What is the exit strategy here? And JC's already got three strategic buyers already lined up. So that's a great motivation, as someone who's interested in investing in it, to say, okay, there's an end goal, right? And those strategics are interested in doing something in 3 to 5 years, which is great. So that's a huge success story, and JC will get into this, in a second here. And then, kind of case in point. So what is the math behind this, right? So before, what we saw was that there would be about 800 LPs interested in every single fund that we would get engaged with. This is the manual way. But no replies, right? And then 17 months later, no fund. After implementing this, what we found was that 800 LP list would shrink down to 92. 92, right? So it's like 1 in 10, right? And the reply rate was 4.2 times what you would see before. So again, quality is so important. It took me forever to learn that story. And on average, the fund will typically have its first kind of close in 7.5 months versus 17-month kind of time frame. And again, I'd love to take credit for this. I did it manually for a long time, but I have a great team behind me. Luckily, I know a thing or two about IT. Like I said, I can spell it. So it was helpful in that regard. But being able to have the systems and the team behind me in order to do this is really helpful. And again, happy to help anyone through kind of that journey.